It's been over a year since the war broke out between the Sudanese Armed Forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The conflict has left thousands of people killed and millions more displaced. The two groups have been fighting over total control of the country. Let's unpack where we're at now. What is it like in Sudan after 15 months of war? James Reynolds is with the International Committee of the Red Cross in Africa, and he joins us from Pretoria. James, it's great to have you on. 15 months, so much brutality, millions of people displaced, and people starving to death in that country, and yet it doesn't feel, just looking at the reaction from the international community, that the situation is as grim as it really is.
Thanks, Michelle. No, it is a very difficult situation. We've seen relatively little progress over the past 15 months in terms of assisting the millions and millions of Sudanese who are in need since the outbreak of this acute phase of conflict in April 2023. And it's a conflict which has seen probably 8 million people displaced within the country, probably 2 million or more now leaving Sudan, entering Chad, South Sudan, other countries as refugees. And we see, a country which has moved backwards. I mean, the essential access to essential services for most Sudanese has really deteriorated. We see food insecurity across many, many parts of the country, and we see people being killed and injured, including many, many civilians across different parts of the country, whether it's in Darfur, in Kordofan, around Khartoum, or elsewhere. So really a pretty gloomy picture, I'm afraid.
It is, especially because this transition that Sudan has been going through has been going on for quite some time, since 2019 and perhaps even long before.
Yes, I think whatever happened in the period between 2019 and 2023 is seems a long time ago now, and the challenges people face have become multiplied by a factor of 10. And I think the difficulty we see is that people don't have enough to eat. Farmers don't have fertilizer or seeds in order to plant. If they can plant, they're scared to go to their fields. So worries about food insecurity, worries about how the armed actors are preying on the civilian population, attacking them directly, looting. We've seen a terrible scale of sexual violence as well against women and others around the country. So really a kind of a breakdown in respect of humanitarian law that is brings a terrible toll on too many people in Sudan. And I think the concern that we'd have as the International Committee of the Red Cross is we haven't yet seen initiatives which can turn the situation around. Now, our role as a humanitarian actor is to sort of try and bring some kind of protection assistance to affected persons. But I think the character of the conflict is such that, at some point there needs to be, at least a temporary ceasefire, if not some kind of definitive political solution. Now, that's obviously got to come from people and actors within Sudan. Ideally, that can be sort of boosted and backed up by external actors, neighboring countries, others with influence around on Sudan, regional actors like IGAD and the African Union, the United Nations, of course. But thus far, I think there's been a multiplicity of efforts, but really very few of them have been able to get much traction, either in terms of bettering humanitarian access, or in terms of improving respect of humanitarian law, or finding some kind of lasting ceasefire or political solution. So I think that's the worry I have at the moment.
Yeah.
It's difficult to see where a solution could come from.
And is there any hope, as far as you can see, in this intergovernmental, it's quite convoluted, but essentially a meeting to start a political dialogue in Sudan That was just announced this week on the 15th of July. That would have been yesterday, on Monday. Is there any hope in this kind of African Union process, or is it, in your view, a talk shop when there are real and pressing life-saving needs on the ground that are unaddressed?
I think we need to keep trying. Is the moment right? And I hope so. And I think we all really need to sort of push these efforts to bring some success, because I think that as long as the conflict remains in its current form, the humanitarian needs it generates are going to remain tremendous and terrible, and really, beyond the capacity of humanitarian actors to respond as much as they should do, as much as they would want to, whether it's because of budget or difficulties around security and access. So I think we really do need to find some kind of solution and push collectively together, but for the good of the population of Sudan.
We know that the war's been going on for 15 months. We know that there are countries in Africa that have been at war for much longer than that, James, for many, many years. Angola comes to mind, and the 20-odd years it spent at war. Might this be the first step to this not being a repeat for Sudan? I imagine that something serious needs to change in how this conflict is addressed if this is not going to be a country at war for decades.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I think we probably 2 years ago, the most acute conflict on the African continent was in Ethiopia, and a solution still needs some support and help was found for the conflict there, including with some efforts from South Africa. But a solution that came from within, that was sort of with cajoling and pushing from outside. Absolutely, we need to see something like that in Sudan. It's clearly by far the most acute kinetic conflict in Africa today, with the worst conflicts for the population. I mean, at ICRC, there are a lot of places on the continent where we've been active for a very long period. In DR Congo, in Somalia, where we see sort of conflicts which have sometimes they're high intensity, sometimes they're sort of lower intensity. But I think that none of them have the same kind of disastrous impact on the whole social fabric of a country as the one in Sudan at the moment. So if we don't find some kind of way to bring this to an end soon, yes, I think the country will be emptied of its or even more emptied of its population, and the people that remain will be completely bereft of means of livelihood, of access to health and education services that they all need. So absolutely, it's a time that we need to really, really push people to come to some kind of solution.
And James, for people who have managed to survive in the face of just impossible odds, how are they surviving? How are they accessing the little food that they can get?
I think a couple of things. One, I think we should really applaud the neighbouring countries which have taken in hundreds of thousands of Sudanese refugees. Often they're countries which don't have that many means at their disposal, but they've done that nonetheless. So really, bravo to them. And I think the other thing one has to highlight is the sort of courage and solidarity that the Sudanese people show to one another in sort of sharing meager resources. Because without that, I think the consequences on the most vulnerable would have been even worse. So that's something which we should certainly underscore. We see very brave and courageous individuals, but also initiatives that different groups in Sudanese society take to really make sure that such medicines that do arrive go to the right place, that are running whether it's soup kitchens or community aid. To share what little resources people have. I think that's something we also need to highlight.
Certainly. James Reynolds, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. James is with the International Committee of the Red Cross in Africa as we tackle the issue of 15 months of war in Sudan. So many people killed and millions more displaced.